The general election campaign is really spicing up now. Sir Keir Starmer has spent the last couple of years trying to reassure everybody that Labour isn't a risk.
I've changed my party. We've changed our party. I've changed this party. This is a changed Labour Party. We were a changed party.
And then yesterday, he let this slip.
Yes, I would describe myself as a socialist. I'd describe myself as a progressive. I'd describe myself as somebody who always puts the country first and party second.
Well, there appeared to be an immediate attempt to row back on the first bit of what he said there, describing himself as a socialist. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said this.
I've always called myself a social democrat, and what I mean by that is that I believe that children from whatever background they come from should get an equal start in life to the opportunities that our country offers. I believe in strong public services to support people all through their lives, from the cradle to the grave, and I believe that work should always pay and offer security to people. So that's how I would describe myself.
But if Sir Keir Starmer is to be believed, i.e. he is a socialist, and if he was elected, Britain would presumably become a socialist country, then the big question has to be this. Does Britain really want socialism? Do we want to be a socialist country? The polls appear to suggest yes, we do. Most of the latest polling data puts Labour 23 points ahead. But what might socialism look like under Labour? Well, Labour has just been endorsed by 121 business bosses, which is a massive boost for them. If businesses don't fear socialist Starmer, then that's good for Labour. I will just caveat that slightly by saying that they've had to retract some of those in the last couple of hours, but still, the majority of that still stands. But there is a fear that Sir Keir Starmer would be in the pocket of the unions. One of Labour's biggest union donors, Unite, said Labour's plans for workers' rights had more holes than a Swiss cheese. What does that mean going forward? What would strike action look like? There is the other potential concern that modern British socialism means being aggressively pro-Palestine. The Socialist Workers' Party is all over these Palestine marches. Keir Starmer has said that he wants to recognise Palestine as a state, and there's this clip of Deputy Leader Angela Rayner appearing to grovel to a room full of pro-Palestine men.
I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it.
This comes alongside arguably Labour's most socialist policy, the VAT hike on private schools. There are calls for them to U-turn after a survey today claimed around 224,000 private pupils could leave as a result of the plans, double the previous estimate. What impact will that have on state schools? So, the question still stands, doesn't it? Does Britain want to be a socialist country? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am, of course, joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku. I have got journalist Jonathan Liss and Conservative commentator Albie Amankona. Albie, I'll start with you. Does Britain want to be socialist?
No. I will say that as a resounding no. At every opportunity that the British public have had the opportunity to vote in a socialist leader or someone even close to socialism, let's take Jeremy Corbyn, for example, back in 2019 and in 2017, Britain has said no. I think it's curious that Keir Starmer has come out today, or yesterday, whenever it was, and said, I am a socialist. I think we should believe him when he says he's a socialist. My grandmother always tells me, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. So beware, Britain. Starmer's a socialist. Don't vote him in.
Jonathan, I mean, Albie's got a point, hasn't he? We have never really been a socialist country. Do we really want to be now?
Well, I'm not sure that's true, actually. If you look at the 1945 to 51 Attlee government, that brought in a welfare state, vast nationalisation of major public services under a monarchy, under a very conservative, small C conservative establishment. It's not true that we've never had socialism in this country.
How long ago was that?
Well, I mean, I just asked the question, I answered it, and you could say that a lot of the policies in the 1970s under Harold Wilson were also socialist. Look, Albie, you and I have no idea what the people of Britain want. We'll all find out in 5 weeks' time. Then we'll find out what the British people want. So that's our answer to that question definitively. But I would say that the Labour Party says in its kind of book it is a democratic socialist party, so I don't think we should read too much into it. Starmer is not saying he's a Marxist-Leninist. We're not going to have a communist revolution, and the Labour offering is pretty centrist in what it's actually giving.
So why say it?
Because Because he was asked a question, and socialism means different things to different people.
That's the problem.
No one can agree on what it means.
That's the problem.
A lot of people
It's like
understand.
Brexit.
Look, a lot of people understand socialism to be what Rachel Reeves just explained in that clip about being a social democrat. Other people will say it's more like Marxism. Clearly, that's not what someone
Esther, I'll
meant.
bring you into this. I think the big fear for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, is that Keir Starmer will say whatever it takes to get elected, and upon election, we will have the destruction of private schools, possibly due to the politics of envy. We will have votes for kids who might be in the back pocket of the unions. They're not happy with him. What does he do if strike action starts ripping through the country, for example? Are you concerned about that?
Well, I'm not necessarily concerned about that because, particularly on the socialism point, we have had socialism. The problem is we've had socialism with no economic growth. So the pie that we're supposed to be sharing and redistributing has got smaller and smaller. We have French-style welfare spending without any economic growth to back it up. And so this whole idea of taxing schools, for instance, what socialist do you know that actually wants to tax education? That doesn't exist in more left-leaning countries across Europe.
It's not taxing education.
Well, no, but it is, because the reason why we don't have VAT on essential goods is because they're essential goods. You cannot argue that education is not an essential good.
Private education.
No, but hold on. But there's a reason for that. A lot of working class people actually got better opportunities in this country after the destruction of grammar schools because they got bursaries to go to private schools. He hasn't acknowledged that anyway, even though that was his background as well. So the point here is, it's not about being scared of whether he's a socialist or not. It's just being scared about the fact that things are going to continue as they are, which has been effectively socialism with no economic growth.
I wouldn't describe anything that this Conservative government has done as being socialist. But on the VAT point, this is about removing an unfair tax break.
It's not unfair.
It is unfair. It is unfair that private schools should have advantages that other people
Would it not be
Only 7% of the
unfair
population
to
is going
dump
private schools.
250,000 children into the state sector?
Without any more schools.
That report that you're citing, I think, has actually had a lot of. I think I was reading that it was kind of bankrolled or part of it was partly responsible by an organisation
but we
that has
do have some real world
interest.
data. Yes, but we do have some real world data. Can I just make this point? Which is that apparently 30,000 fewer pupils went to private school this year as a result of the fear, and that cost £20 million.
We can argue about the numbers, fine, but do you acknowledge that by virtue of fees going up by 20%, there will be people that will no longer be able to go to fee-paying schools? Do you acknowledge that? No matter the numbers, do you acknowledge that?
I think it really depends on.
No, hold on, if anything goes up by 20%,
it will really depend. No, it will really depend on whether schools pass on.
But that's basic economics. When something becomes more expensive, fewer people can afford it.
Not all schools are going to pass that on.
They will pass it on.
A lot of schools will
which allow people like me, who can have been able to go to a private school without a scholarship or a bursary, to go to a private school. Do you accept that parents who send their children to private schools are relieving the taxpayer because actually they are opening up places to children who can't afford to?
They're paying for a service they themselves are not using. Why should they have to pay for that?
All right, Jonathan.
If they're not using state education, why should they have to then pay?
It's like saying, why should everyone pay tax?
No, it's not. Well, if you're a childless person, you might have reservations about paying for all the other things in the welfare state that you don't benefit from.
The principle of the country is that everyone sort of pays into something, and everyone gets something out of it. I mean, I don't think that's basically that's how the social contract is meant to work. I agree with you. The social contract is not working very well at the moment.
So do you think? I'll go down the line on this, but do you think the country should fear Keir Starmer?
Yes, because a lot of the time you will hear people say Conservatives are less scared of Keir Starmer because he's not a socialist. He's just told us he is a socialist. So this whole centrist dad that he's put across is a lie.
Jonathan?
I don't believe that Albie believes that. It's not about language, it's about deeds. I would love Starmer to be a socialist. I've been people on the left have actually been mostly disappointed that he's rowed back on most of the pledges he gave the Labour leadership, for example, in 2020. I think he needs to be a lot more progressive. At the moment, I'll be criticising the government from the left. What he calls himself is neither here nor there.
OK, and Esther, do you think there are aspects that we should fear when it comes to a Labour government? I mean, there does appear to be this slightly bizarre link at the moment as well between socialism and also being quite rabidly pro-Palestine, for example, appeasing certain communities.
No, because it can't be any worse than what we've got now. I mean, the Tories have no leg to stand on. You can say, oh, you should fear Keir Starmer. You've been terrible. What are we more of the same? How is that? We've already experienced it, so how could it be much worse?
What does it mean to be why rabidly pro-Palestine?
Well, I would say that sitting in front of a group...
Do you mean pro-Hamas?
I mean, rabid is quite a charged word, isn't it? Like, you've got rabies. I mean, I
would argue that some of the behaviour that we have seen on the streets of London and elsewhere in this country for a considerable period of time has been rabid, yes.
Well, how has Labour exhibited any kind of...
Well, some Labour MPs have marched alongside that, have spoken at those events. We've also seen, the fact that Labour, for example, has been quite willing, I would argue, to pander to some of those people.
Well, by saying that Israel should withdraw water and electricity from the Palestinians.
Or, for example, the candidate that Labour stood in Rochdale that actually said that October the 7th
disavowed.
was a conspiracy,
disavowed by the Labour Party.
theory. Yeah, but you still stood him.
They didn't stand him. They didn't stand him. He was kicked off the ballot paper. He was kicked off the Labour whip before he was. That's why he wasn't elected. That's why Galloway got in. I don't think that you could argue that Labour's been too pro-Palestinian. Quite the reverse.
OK, all right. I wonder whether or not people make their own minds about that clip of Angela Rayner in a room full of blokes there, kind of kowtowing to them. Might have a different view, but obviously you're entitled to yours.